Hello, everybody. I'm Sef Townsend, and welcome to the World Storytelling Cafe. This is a special place. It's a place where people from all over the world, from every continent, are contributing to do stories. And it's run by some wonderful people who are in different places. The centre is originally in Marrakesh in Morocco, so I'd like to say hello to the people there. Ahlan wa sahlan, assalamu alaikum, azul. And there are people in different countries, the people in Romania who are making the technical thing happen, so I'd like to say hello to them. Bună ziua, thank you very much, mulțumesc, and to everybody involved, thank you very much. A few things just before we start. If you want to have more information, go to www.worldstorytellingcafe.com and you'll get all the storytellers and all the list of what's happening when. And one little more thing. At this time, a lot of us aren't getting work in the places we normally go to, in schools and prisons and hospitals, so none of us are earning any money. But there is a little button where you can contribute if you feel you'd like to any of the storytellers you like. But I think it's time to start with a story. But before the story, something to get me going. It's a storytelling call from Ghana in Africa, and it goes like this. Everybody, everybody, bring your calabash. Bring your calabash. Mofwe, mofwe, chinweba. Mofwe, mofwe, chinweba. We ende coco. 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 Oh. Bring your calabash. This is a calabash. And a calabash grows on a vine, and you can put things in it. There are different sizes of calabashes. There's this one. But what does a calabash look like before it's made into a bowl? It grows like this on a vine. And you can do lots of things. You can cut them to make bowls, or you can cut them this way. So you can cut them, slice them that way, and make a spoon. Or you can make a little special box to hold things. The clever people of Africa know how to take bamboo and thread, and they've sewn together this little thing. That, on the top, was first there. They cut it off, and two bits of bamboo that made a very nice container. And what do you think is inside it? Have a look. What's inside? What's in? Another little calabash to keep the stories in. And let's have a story. So, the first story that I'm going to tell is from the Middle East, from Syria. And it's dedicated to the people of Syria who are going through a much harder time than we are going in our self-isolation. Let's just think of them. So, it's from the town of Quneitra in the southwest of Syria. And in this little town, outside the town in a village, there was a family. Father and mother. Father looked after the orchard, mother looked after the household. The son Ahmed and Mahmoud, they would dig in the soil, and the daughter Sama would go out every day taking her sheep and her goats so they could graze. And every day she went through the orchard that her father looked after. And she remembered the song that her mother sang of the fruit in the orchard. I'll sing it in Arabic first, then in English. Tick, 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 Maya Misleman. Tick, 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 Josik when can. Tick, 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 can bil ha'ali. Am yu'tof khawch ureman. In English. Tick, 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 Mama Suleiman. Tick, 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 where's your husband gone? Tick, 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 he's in the field. Pomegranates, peaches in his yield. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. She remembered this song every time she went through that orchard. And she went through that orchard with her sheep and her goats to graze. Now this day was a hot spring day. The sun was shining, the herbs were smelling delicious, and the flowers were in bloom. Her sheep and goats were grazing over there, and so she decided to lie down and put her head against a tree, and before you knew it, she was asleep. But when she woke up, it was dark already, and she looked for her sheep, and she looked for her goats. Sheep, goats, tick, 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 sheep, goats. The sheep and the goats were lost. Oh no, my mom and dad are going to be so angry when I go home without the sheep and... But she looked over by the mountain, which was always there. It was now dark. And as she looked, she heard something. And she walked towards the mountain, and there she saw a cave. It was very dark. But as she got closer, she heard... And she went into the cave, but there were cobwebs and things brushing against her. But she could see a light, and she went towards the light. And as she came closer, she saw a big pot, a big cauldron with a fire underneath, and standing behind the cauldron, a role. A role is something in the Middle East that you don't want to see. Her hair was all over the place, and she wore a black shiny dress, and she said, "Hello, Sama, I've been waiting for you." "How do you know my name?" "I know your name, and I see you every day, and now you can do something for me. Now you can do horrible things to people for me, and it will help me do my work." "I'm not doing horrible things for anybody. I'm a good girl, and I come from a good family, and I'm leaving here." "No, you're not, because if you dare move out of here, I will turn you into an ugly snake." "You can't do that. And anyway, I'm going home now." And as she turned to go, and Sama felt her arm move and stick to her body, and the other arm and her legs together. And she started getting longer and longer and longer. "Oh, this is terrible!" And longer, and there were scales on her, just like a snake. And she curled up, and there she was. And the role, the witch, said to her, "Now, anybody who is frightened of you will make you even more ugly. Every time someone is frightened, you will become uglier. And the only way that the spell can be broken if somebody dares to jump over you 3 times, but they'll be too scared because you will be so horrible." What did Sama do? She started to snake back home through the orchard. Tick, tick, tick. And she snaked her way towards her house. "I'll go and tell my mum and dad what's happened to me." And when she came to the door of the kitchen, which was open, her mum and dad and brothers were sitting at the table, pushing their food around the plate. They couldn't eat a thing because they were worried about Sama. And there she was. And she opened her mouth to say, "Mom, Dad, I'm here. They've turned me into a snake." But instead of "Mom, Dad, I'm here," out of her mouth came "Sss, sss." Her mother looked and she said, "Oh, what a horrible snake." Ahmed and Mahmoud picked up brooms and they said, "Get out of our kitchen." And every time they said that, every time they hit with the broom, Summer became more ugly. And she said, "Even my mum and my dad don't recognize who I am." And she snaked her way across the fields and back to the orchard. And when she got back to the orchard and through the orchard and to the cave, I'm going to tell that witch to turn me back into Summer. The cave was empty. There was no cauldron, there was no fire, there was no witch. And all she could do was curl up in a little coil and wait until the morning. Now in the morning, she started exploring the cave. She came to one entrance, a door, and she went through the door, and it was filled with gold coins. She looked and went through another door, silver coins, through another door, pearls and jewels. But she thought, what can gold and silver do for me? What can pearls and jewels do for a snake? Will they keep me from the heat of the sun in the summer? Will they keep me from the cold, bitter winds in the winter? Because now all I can do is stay here in this cave. And that is what she did. She stayed in the cave. And she went out to get some food, snake food, grass, insects, things that Summer would never dream of eating. And time passed. A whole year passed of her being a snake. But in that time, she practiced to speak, because her mouth was not the mouth of Summer. Her mouth was a pointy snake mouth. And instead of saying, "My name is Summer," it said, "S, s, s." But she tried so hard, and she said, "My name is Summer." And after the year, she could say a few things. It was quite strange how she spoke, but she could make the sounds. And the springtime came again, and she was coiled up in the sun outside the cave, when she heard some people coming. They were laughing, and she saw 2 of them were her brothers, Ahmed and Mahmoud, and the third one she didn't know. But they came towards her, and before they got even close, she said, "Stop! I'm Summer, your sister. I'm not a snake." And they looked at her, and she explained, "If you jump over me 3 times without being scared, I will be released from the spell. But please try. I will get more ugly each time you're scared." And Ahmed said, "Don't worry, Summer. I'm going to jump over you." And he took a run, and he ran, and he ran, and he ran. And just before he jumped over her, she was so ugly because he was so scared. And he fell over in fright. And the next brother, he said, "I'll jump over you, Summer." And he ran, and he ran, and he ran. And he started to jump, and he went over, but he fell on the other side because she was so ugly. He was so scared. So they hadn't broken the spell. And the third person, a friend of theirs who she didn't know, he said, "I'll try and do what I can." And he took a long, long run, and he ran, and he ran, and he ran. And he did it once. He had to do it again. And he ran from the other side, and he did it a second time. And a third time. And at the moment he got to the other side, having jumped over her 3 times, the scales started dropping. And instead of her arms being connected to her body, she could move her arms, and she could move her legs. And she was Summer. And they put a blanket over her because she was now cold. And they took her home. And when she got home, her mum and dad were so delighted, and they cried tears of joy. and they had a big meal. But the next day, Sama and her mother and father, Ahmed, Mahmoud, and the stranger, they all went to the cave, and Sama shared the gold, the silver, the pearls, and the jewels, not only with her family, but with the whole of the village, who had good reason to celebrate, because Sama looked at the beautiful young boy, and he looked at her, and they fell in love, and of course there was a wedding, and everyone lived happily ever after. And that's the story of Sama the snake girl. So where to next? I think I'd like to sing a song, if you'd like that. Si veríais al camello asentado al tablero, haciendo una buena fideo más delgado de su cabello, ganeme hace y basto a la jaraba y silvane, ganeme hace y basto a la jaraba y silvane. Have you ever seen a camel sitting at a table, rolling out a fine filo, a fine noodle, thinner than its hair? You haven't? You've got a lot to see in life. Si veríais a la pulga asentada en la cuna, diciendo a la criatura, diciendo a la criatura, dame hace y basto a la jaraba y silvane, dame hace y basto a la jaraba y silvane. Have you ever seen a mouse sitting in the corner sewing a good button? I'll sing it once more in the Ladino language that this song is sung in. Si veríais al ratón asentado en el cantón, cosiendo un buen botón, cosiendo un buen botón, dáneme hace y basto a la jaraba y silvane, dáneme hace y basto a la jaraba y silvane. So, that was Have You Ever Seen? A song from the Sephardic tradition of the Jews who originated in Spain and Portugal. And it makes me think of another story, also about sewing. This story comes from a song in Yiddish, and I hope I get the tune right, because sometimes I forget the tune and I even forget the song. It's Hab ich mir am Mantel, ja da di da da ba da ba da, hab ich mir am Mantel, von verzeitigen Stoff. The tune is wrong, but anyway, you get the idea. But what do those words mean? They mean I've got a little coat from worn out material, and this is the story of my grandfather, who wanted to give me a present. He was a tailor. He would sew and sew and sew with his needle and his thread. He didn't have much money, because all the money would go on the material that he gave to the people to make the clothes. But he had an old blue blanket. Oh, and he thought, this was when I was very little, very small, I'm going to make something for my little Sefie. That's my name, Sef. And he got out his scissors. He got the blanket, and he cut, snip, 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 cut, cut, snip, snip, cut. And he got all the pieces together. And he got his needle and his thread, and he sewed, and he sewed, and he sewed, and he sewed. And from the blue blanket, he made a little blue coat for me. And I said, oh, Grandpa, I love my little blue coat. And I took it out and I went everywhere, up the hills and down the hills. I went out in the wind and the snow, no, that's sun, the wind and the sun and the snow and the rain. And I splashed in the puddles and I rolled in the mud until that little blanket, that blue coat, I'm getting it wrong, until that little blue coat was completely worn out. And I said, oh, Grandpa, my blue coat is worn out. And he said, no, 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 no. That will never do. From that little blue coat, I'll make something new. And he got all the pieces, he got his scissors, and he started to sew and sew and sew. And from that little blue coat, he made a little blue vest. In my country, we call this a waistcoat. It's a vest, it's a waistcoat. And I said, oh, Grandpa, I love it. And I took that out, up the hill, down the hill, in the sun and the rain and the wind and the snow. And I splashed in the puddles and I rolled in the mud until it was worn out. Oh, Grandpa, it's worn out. But he said once more, like he always did, don't worry, I will make you something new. And he got out his scissors, snip, snip, and he got out his needle and his thread, and he sewed and he sewed and he sewed and he sewed. And from that little waistcoat, he made a little blue cap. Oh, I love it, Grandpa. And I put it on. Well, in those days, I was much smaller. And I took it out up the hills, down the hills, in the sun and the rain and the wind and the snow. And I splashed in the puddles and I rolled in the mud until again that was worn out. I didn't even have to say to Grandpa, it's all worn out. He said, don't worry, I know what you're going to say. From that little blue cap, I'll make something new. He got all the pieces together. He started to cut. He got his needle and his thread, and he sewed and he sewed and he sewed and he sewed. And from that little hat, that little blue hat, he made a little bow tie. Oh, I love it. And I went out and I splashed in the puddles and I rolled in the mud. Same thing again, Grandpa. No, 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 that will never do. You look so disappointed. From that little blue bow tie, I'll make something new. And he cut and he sewed and he made a little blue button. Oh, I love it, I love it, I love it. And I put it on and I went out, and you know what happened. I went up the hill, down the hill, in the sun and the rain and the wind and the snow, and I splashed in the puddle and I rolled in the mud, and it was worn out. And Grandpa said, no, 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 I'll make something new from that. But it was so small. And when he got his scissors out and his needle, I can't make anything. It's too small. Even that is actually, I've already made something. We've made something together because we've made a story. And the story is the story of the button, which came from the bow tie, which came from the little blue hat, which came from the little blue waistcoat or vest, and that came from the little blue coat, the blue coat, And that came from the blanket. And that is the story that we have made together. And I've told you that story, he said to me. And now you can tell that story to other people. And they can tell the story of the little blue coat. Hope you like that story, which came from the Yiddish tradition of Eastern Europe. But I think it's time to go across the world. Fortunately, I've worked in all the countries where my stories are from, and so I love to share them. But I'm very dry. I'm just going to take a sip of delicious. Oh, which makes me think, I think I'll do something from London before going across the world, because I'm in London. And it's a little bit of London folklore, and it goes like this. Wait a minute. How does it start? 1, 2, 3, me mother caught a flea. She put it in the teapot, made a cup of tea. The flea jumped out, me mother gave a shout. In walked me brother with his shirt hanging out. La 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la. 4, 5, 6, me father's in a fix. He tried to get the billy goat to hatch a few chicks. The chicks hatched out, me father gave a shout. In walked me granny with her hair sticking out. La 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la. Oompa 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 pa, oompa oompa pa, oompa 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 pa, oompa oompa pa. 7, 8, 9, me granny's doing fine. She washed all the children and hung them on the line. The children ran away. Me granny said, hey, we'll be back on the holiday. La 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la. Oompa 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 pa, oompa oompa pa, oompa 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 pa, oompa oompa pa. Here is the saucer, here is the cup. Think I'll have a sip of tea, drink it all up. Delicious. And now I have to have a real cup of tea because I'm a bit dry. I've had a bit of a cold. Where to next? South America or Korea? South America. I've been very lucky to work in Argentina and Chile and Ecuador and Colombia, and I gather stories wherever I go. And I just want to show you this huipala. The huipala is the flag of all the indigenous peoples of the Andes. And of course, in South America, just like other colonized places, the indigenous people have suffered. But there are so many different groups in South America. There are the Atacameños, the Mapuche, Selknam, the Wichi, the Goja, the Toba, the Chibcha, the Wicca. All of these people have their own culture and they have their own stories. And I'd like to tell you a story that comes from the Atacama, which I was visiting a couple of years ago, and I learned a lot of stories. And this story is about this little creature. You see it? It's glass, but it's actually a picaflor, or a hummingbird. And hummingbirds are the smallest birds, I believe, in the planet. This is quite big, actually. They're much smaller. and with its long beak, it sips picaflor. It sips from the nectar of the flowers. But picaflores, they weren't always tiny, and this is even big, because when the picaflores were first seen in the deserts of the Atacama, they were huge, and they bothered all the people who tried to grow things. Now, the Atacama is the driest desert in the world, but that doesn't mean to say things don't grow. Because on one side of the desert there are high mountains. On the other side there is the sea. And wherever there are high mountains, there is water. The high Andes give water. But where does the water go? It goes underground. And the water that's underground sometimes evaporates onto the surface. And as it evaporates, there are salt flats, because it turns into salt. And these are called salares. So you have the desert, you have the salt flats, but also you have little cracks in the earth. And wherever there's a crack in the deserty earth, there's green. Things grow. And one thing that grows is the rica rica. This is a little herb. Well, I show you there. It's in a glass bottle. I'll take some out. The rica rica is a little herb that is very good. It's very good for your health. And it grows in these little cracks in the earth. And this is the story. There was a man in one of the oases, because there are oases in the Atacama, and he tried to grow his vegetables. But every day a big picaflor would come and pick, and ruin his vegetables. And he'd say, go away, I hate picaflores. I hate you, I hate you, I hate you. While he was doing that every day, his daughter would go out with her llamas, or llamas as they're called in that part of the world. She'd take the llamas out. She was like a shepherdess of llamas. And they would crunch and bite and eat the rica rica flowers, and they would make them healthy and keep them fed. And she might find some little berries. It would take her a long time, but she did this. And one day, while she was out with her llamas, she was picking berries, when suddenly, behind her, there was a young man. And he said, I'll help you pick those berries. And she said, okay. She didn't know where he'd come from, but he helped her pick the berries. And before you knew it, she got 2 little baskets full of berries. And he said, now, let's play carguitas. What do you mean, carguitas? It's like piggyback. Look, you get on my back and we'll run and jump. So she got on his back. He was quite a nice young man. She got on his back and he ran, and she was so happy. And he said, now it's your turn. I want to get on your back. But you're too big. You're too big for me. But even so, he said, come on. And he put his arms over her shoulder, and she started running. But he seemed so light. It was amazing. He was a normal-sized young man. But she was carrying him. And as she was running and having fun, she noticed that the hands that were over her shoulders were talons, claws. It was a bird. It was a huge bird. It was a condor. Now, the condor is the biggest bird that flies across the Andes. And before she knew it, she was lifted into the sky, and she went higher and higher and higher and higher until he dropped her on top of Licancabur, which is a big volcano covered in snow in the Andes. And there she was. She said, why have you brought me here? I brought you here because I love you. I want you to be my wife. I'll go and get you some food, but it's too cold for me up here. And he flew off. And when he came back, he dropped little pieces of raw meat I can't eat this. I want to go back to my father. Please let me go. I can't eat this. Well, I'll go and get you something else. And he flew off again. And when he came back, he dropped rats. Oh, I can't eat this. It's horrible. Please let me go. And just at that moment, one of the big picaflores was flying by. And the picaflor said to the condor, she can't eat that. It's raw. Humans need cooked meat. I tell you what, on the other side of Cordillera, which means the range of the Andes, they're having an asado, which means a barbecue. They're having an alpaca asado. Go and get some of that meat, bring it back to her, and she will be able to eat it. And the condor thought that was a great idea. He flew off, he flew away. Oh, this was great. In the meantime, the condor said, I'm going to get your father and rescue you. So he flew over to her father, who was trying to do his work in the field. And the father, when he saw the picaflor, he said, go away, go away, go away. But the picaflor had some rica rica in its beak, and it dropped it in front of the father. And the father thought, this is strange. And the picaflor flew away and came back, and flew away and came back. And the father thought, he's trying to give me a message about my daughter, because my daughter picks picaflor. And he, for some reason, it was if the picaflor had told him, bring a rope. Maybe in those days, birds could speak to humans. Well, it is the realm of story. So he took a rope, and they went and they went and they went, and they got to the bottom of the mountain. And the picaflor took the rope in its beak and flew and hovered as they do. They hover and flew higher and higher and higher until it got to the peak. And she held onto the rope, and somehow he held on to the higher part of the rope, and he hovered down, 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 until he brought her to the bottom of the mountain. And she and her father went back to their farm, to their little farm in the oasis. And the picaflor said, stay inside, because that condor will become looking for her. And they stayed inside. And every day the condor came flying over, looking for them. One day the picaflor went back to see how they were. And just as the picaflor arrived there to see how they were, the condor arrived. And the condor finally had found the one who had taken his wife. And the condor pounced on the picaflor and bit and tore and pulled with its talons and bit and bit and bit and bit and bit, until the picaflor was in 100 pieces on the floor, on the ground. And the condor flew away. But inside the house, the father and the daughter, they heard the fluttering of wings, the fluttering of little wings. And when they looked out, they saw not one, not two, but hundreds of tiny little picaflores, of tiny little hummingbirds. And ever since that day, the people in that little desert oasis have welcomed the picaflor, the hummingbird, to their homesteads, because they know that the picaflor saved the daughter of the farmer. And that is the story from the Atacama Desert, which I picked up a couple of years from some lovely people who live there. So, I think it's time to go to another part of the world. I hope you're okay with me going from one place to the next. Another place I've worked, and I've told stories, and I've learned a lot, is Korea. I've been to North Korea and South Korea, and everywhere I've been, I've picked up stories. And this is a story that I love. which is the story I'm going to tell? Oh, yes. I was just thinking, I know so many stories, but this is a story that I picked up when I was in Korea about 10 years ago, and it's one that's very special to me, and I'd like to share it with you. There was once an old man and an old woman who loved each other. They were so loving. Not only did they love each other, they seemed to love everybody around them. Maybe the reason was that they had no child of their own to love, and so all their love went out to all the people around them. They were old now, and because they didn't have any children, life was hard. When they dug to plant their lettuces, their radishes, it was very hard. And when in the autumn, when all the chestnuts are on the trees, they had to wait for the chestnuts to fall. They couldn't do what other people do, hit them with sticks or climb up to get them. And so they would wait. And they always remembered the song that people sang at this time of year. 바람이 분다, 바람이 불어, 연평 바다, 바람이 분다, 바람이 불어, 온 stagione, gumba mio, winds gently blowing, our own sea breeze, winds are blowing, and we will have roasted chestnuts, la 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 la, la 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 la. Because they loved people so much, they always gave the first of everything that they had to their neighbor. It was autumn. They roasted the first chestnuts that they got, and they took them to their neighbor. In the springtime, they did the same thing. Their first lettuces, their first radish, they would take to the neighbor. Now it was autumn. They had some freshly roasted chestnuts, and they went to their neighbor and they knocked on the door. And the neighbor opened the door. Yes? What do you want? Dear neighbor, it's autumn. These are chestnuts. And because you are our neighbor, and because these are our first chestnuts, they are for you. And the neighbor who was rich, and the neighbor who was well built because he'd had many good meals, he ate much better than they did. He had a much better house than they did. But he was mean and he was greedy. He took the chestnuts and he said, oh, yes. And he closed the door. And he didn't even say thank you. But they did this nevertheless. In the springtime, the first radishes. In the springtime, the first lettuces. They are for you because you are our neighbor. Yes, okay. And he didn't even say thank you. But now it was winter. And now it was a bitterly cold winter. And the snow had fallen, deep snow, snow on snow. And there was ice. And the old man and the old woman were huddled in their house, and their hands were warm in front of their fire. But their backs and the rest of them was freezing cold. The fire was just warming their hands, but the rest of them was too cold. And as the old woman looked in the corner at the wood pile, she noticed it was going down and down and down. If we don't get any more wood tonight, we'll freeze to death. Yes, I know, said the old man. But, she said, how can you go? You can't walk well, and it's icy and snowy. If you go out, you will slip. You could break your leg. You could get injured. Yes, but as you said, if we don't get any more firewood tonight, we'll surely freeze to death. And so, with his walking stick, he set out of the house with his satchel on his back, and he trod into the deep snow. and every footstep he took, he looked in the hole in the snow to see if there was any wood. He took a little twig here, a little branch there, but it was wet and too hard to burn. But as he was walking, he heard, and he looked and he saw a bird. He saw a yellow bird, a songbird. A songbird in winter? That was very strange. But the bird went deeper and deeper into the wood, and the old man followed him, as if the bird said, "Follow me." And he followed and followed, and the bird stopped on one branch of the tree, as if saying, "Look down, look down, look down." And the old man looked down, and down in the ice, coming out of a hole in the ice, out of a spring that he'd never seen before in this wood, there was water. And by now he was tired, he was thirsty. So he took a sip of the water. It wasn't even cold, and it was fresh, refreshing and crystal clear. So he took another. He felt better, but now he felt very tired. So he leaned against a tree, and there was ice underneath it, but it didn't matter, and he fell to sleep. But when he woke up, he sprung up, and he jumped up, and he started moving and picking up. Wait a minute, he thought. I've got so much energy. Remember before he had a walking stick? None of it now. He was as strong as an ox, and he picked wood, and he moved the snow, and before you knew it, his satchel was full of snow. It was so full he was holding on to it, and he couldn't knock on the door. So he kicked against the door, and his wife opened the door and said, what do you mean, let me in? But you're so young. Feel your skin. Of course, he had to feel his skin because they had no mirrors in those days. It's true. There's not a wrinkle on my face. It must be the water. Come with me, and I'll take you to get some of that water that's turned me into a youth. And he took her by the hand, and she said, "Wait a minute, I'm still old." But he picked her up by the arms, in his arms, and he went to the wood, and she took some water. But rather than let her lie on the cold earth and go to sleep after she felt tired, he picked her up and he took her back home. Next morning, they were so full of energy, and they were clearing the snow, and they were mending little holes in the roof, and they were mending the paper windows in the house, and they were burying the kimchi jars, and their rich neighbor looked over his face. What's going on? Who are those new people in my neighbour's house? I'm going to find out. And he went over. By now they'd gone in to have a little sip of tea. And he knocked on the door. They opened the door. Who are you? Where'd you come from? Where are my neighbours? What's happened? He couldn't understand. And they explained to him everything that had happened. And they told him everything that I've told you. And before he finished listening to the story, he was off into that wood. Now that was about 10 o'clock in the morning. It was winter time, remember? And now it was 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And the wife said to her husband, "He went and he's not back. He must have fallen over in the snow, or some wild animal has killed him. We must go and find out and see what's happened to him." And they went into the wood, they went through the snow, and they went to the place where that little spring of water was. But they saw nothing except a little pile of clothes, a little pile of his clothes. You see, an animal has eaten him, and animals don't eat clothes, they just eat flesh and bones. Something's happened to him. But then as they looked at the little pile of clothes, it started to move. And then out of the movement, they heard, it was a baby. And they went over and they picked up that baby. And the man looked at his wife, and the wife looked at her husband. And without saying a word, they knew what they were going to do. And they did it. They took that baby home, and they raised that baby up. And the baby became a child, and the child became a young man. And everyone said in the village, "Isn't that young man generous and kind? Isn't he the nicest person? He's just like his parents, those loving people." And maybe that was the answer, that we all need a second chance sometimes. He only needed something in his life which he probably had never had. And that begins with an L. And we all know that that is love. And with that story, I'd like to end telling for the World Storytelling Cafe. It's been really nice telling stories to you, and I hope you join once more by looking at www.worldstorytellingcafe.com, and you'll find all the links to all the stories. Bye everybody. It's been really lovely talking to you, and now I have to switch it off. Bye bye.
Ladies and gentlemen, you have just been listening to the most magnificent storyteller, and just like if you come into a pub or a bar, if you happen to be in America, and there's no door charge, but there's a tip jar, or there's a hat, we'd really appreciate it, because our tellers, they've got no way to earn at the moment. We'd really appreciate it if you could reach into your pocket and you could drop a little something into the hat. Thank you. And to do that, you have to go to the website, World Storytelling Cafe.